I think we know why we are here and why we're having this meeting today. What is on my screen now? Okay. All right, sorry about that. I think we know why we are here and why we're having this this meeting, amazing meeting today. It is basically to launch and open this platform, HD Africa, where African talent can, you know, have a place, you know, to bring their ideas and test their ideas and consult on the continent. As COVID-19 is devastating economies around the world, we don't want to be those that sit back and complain. We don't want to be those that sit back and wish that things were different. We're trying to do something about it, and hence HD Africa, so that young people who have ideas that probably can save the continent in terms of the COVID-19 itself, or in terms of solving other problems that the continent is facing, they can be able to bring these ideas on this platform and have their voice and their ideas heard. And so basically that is what this whole thing is about, which I am very much passionate about, because I believe so much in innovation, and I believe so much in us Africans being able to solve our own problems, and or at least trying to solve our own problems, even if we don't succeed, which I believe we would. But at least having that mindset to solve our own problems. An article I wrote recently, which someone shared on LinkedIn, and it was about Rwanda and them building their own Silicon Valley. And someone responded to that article a few days ago and said, Africa is always trying to bite more than they can chew. They haven't even done building roads and all of these infrastructures and clinics and hospitals, and now they're trying to build Silicon Valley. I literally went away and took a deep breath, and I asked myself, should I even dignify this comment with a response? And I was like, no, I'm gonna have to respond to this guy. And so I responded, and I told him that he wants us to stay back in the second industrial revolution, or the third industrial revolution, as he's claiming, that we should not even be trying to participate in these technologies. But I told him that the more we stay back, the more we are going to remain backwards, and we're not going to go forward for the foreseeable time. Because one thing is that if we as Africans, if we as a people on the continent start to embrace these new technologies instead of pushing them away, and instead of being so technophobia, like, no, this is not for us, we are going to remain behind. And one of the things I told him in that comment was that if we embrace technology, we are going to achieve the things he has just named: building of roads, building of all of this infrastructure, clinics, and all of this. The new technologies are going to help us to achieve them much faster, much cheaper, and on a larger scale. Take 3D printing, for example. If we adopt that kind of technology on the continent, rather than using sticks and spade to dig roads, 3D printing can create an entire block of buildings in a day, you know. And so that is how fast these technologies can help us achieve these things. So not for me to go into it, because I know Rendani has to go. I would just say that I think that we are about to birth something really unique and really important today. And we believe that we can be part of pioneering change in Africa. We can be part of bringing, you know, the solutions that plague the continent, rather than running to China or running to the West. We can try to homegrown, you know, our own solutions, which we have already started doing because of the things we've seen already that COVID-19 has pushed us into. You know, there are ventilators being produced on the continent, which if China was okay and there was no COVID-19, we would have run to China, please produce for us. But now there are solutions that are happening, innovative solutions that are happening on the continent, because we have realized that, you know what, we can do this. We can do this. And I strongly believe in my heart that we can do this. I'm very much passionate about Africa. I'm passionate about innovation. And being on a platform like this feels like such an honor for me. And I thank everyone for coming. And I'll give it up to Rendani so that he can finish up and keep talking as we go along. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nikki. Rendani, I know that you have another meeting. Do you want to, let me just we are 1 minute behind your time. So I think, fire away and then I'll do the rest after. Is that okay?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. And I'm really excited to be here. And I think we are indeed in a great opportunity to see how we drive our own efforts forward. And as part of this discussion, I thought I'd just share, a brief snippet from, particularly for those who are bringing their ideas in terms of some of the things that I think it's important to be able to consider, in the sense of, not all innovations are created equally. And I think such a categorization is very important in the sense of ensuring that the kind of strategic maneuver that as the inventor, as the innovator puts in place, then takes a recognition of, the kind of innovation that you are putting on the table, right? And just for the purpose of today, on a high level, I like to categorize innovation as being sustaining and also innovations as being disruptive, right? When we have sustaining innovations, these are the kinds of innovation that we plug into existing industrial ecosystems, right? And it's important to know that you are plugging your innovation into existing industrial ecosystem, because the kind of strategy that you need to put in place to compete in an existing industrial ecosystem then has to take cognizance that you are not necessarily creating a new market, you are not necessarily coming up with an entirely new product, but that your product enters the market and has to be able to compete and allow such a particular industrial ecosystem to be able to continue to earn its profit. And the reason why that is also important is because, every industry makes money in a certain way, what I like to call the profit formula. So if you are entering a particular industry and you don't understand how that particular industrial ecosystem makes money, then you'll find that as much as your idea is brilliant, but when you put it on the ground, then the kind of maneuver in the business modeling might not be suitable for that particular space, right? And then when we look at your disruptive innovation, of which I think that's where there's such a big room from an African point of view, because we continue to hear stats of how many people don't have electricity. We continue to hear stats of how many people don't have access to quality education and to quality water. What that allows us is that you have an opportunity to create new markets. You have an opportunity to make use of, what are somehow fairly matured technologies and package them in an entirely new way, right? For instance, we currently get the bulk of our electricity from a centralized system of ESCOM, right? But with the renewable technologies, there's an opportunity to offer, the same services in a different way. And unlike the people in the urban area who prefer to have their electricity 24 hours and would do everything to make sure they have their electricity 24 hours, for somebody else in a village where they don't have electricity, versus to tomorrow when you can offer them electricity for 6 to 12 hours, they might be more appreciative of having some electricity versus somebody else in such a setup. And I think, so this categorization then becomes important, because then you are then able to understand what are the kind of strategies that you're going to put in place. For instance, if you're in a disruptive innovation setup, it is more about how you outline what are your assumptions about your new market and how are you going to go about testing those particular assumptions. And that becomes important from an investor point of view, showing that you understand the kind of maneuver that you need to be able to put in place to move forward. And I think, as I've indicated, for the purpose of today, I think such a presentation of ideas then becomes important, because then it's clear how your business will then take root and compete in the particular market, and for the investor or your strategic partners to be able to recoup what they've invested in your business. So I think with the brevity of time, I will stop there and I will listen through until about 4:25. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Rendani. So Rendani sits with the 4R Commission of the Presidency of South Africa. And like Omar said, I agree with him. Please know that you have to rush. Say hi to the president on our behalf, and please tell him what we're doing. For the purpose of those who've just joined, HG Africa is an impact-driven marketplace designed to connect Africans from Cape to Cairo, be it entrepreneurs with investors through HD Innovation Hub, or freelancers with potential employers through their HD Freelancers platform, or traders across various industries to customers through HD Market. So this is us doing our bit, basically, to build the Africa that we want. And for the purpose of this platform today, we are focusing primarily on the HD Innovation Hub elevator pitch competition that is set to convene later this month. And this is in preparation of those who've already submitted their ideas, their concepts, their MVPs, and so forth. So we have very knowledgeable guests who've joined us on this platform today to share valuable insights with you on how, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, you can position yourself and maximize your chances of basically acquiring an investor, a funder, a sponsor, accelerator, or incubator for your business idea from anywhere in the world. And as such, I think if you joined early enough to catch Nikki's introduction, you will understand that Africa is ripe for these kind of innovations. So we do need young people, young minds who are hungry to actually help us build, this Africa that we're always saying that we want. Without wasting any more time, I am going to ask Pumza, who is the Chief Innovation Officer of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. So she's basically representing Africa, but she's based here in South Africa, to just talk us through some of the key opportunities presented by the much anticipated AFCFTA agreement that it was set to be launched on the 1st of July, but has been postponed indefinitely. I think there is a rumor that we're looking at the first month of 2021. But this agreement is definitely going to make Africa the largest market basically in the globe. So it really is our time for us to take, grab these opportunities and run with them. So Pumza, without further ado, please go ahead and tell us what we can expect and how we can leverage off of this opportunity.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sepati, and thanks to the colleagues. It certainly is a very exciting time to really be part of something of this nature at this time in Africa, because this is the time that Africa is speaking in unison and saying that we have been consumers of products and we have been the biggest buyers of products from everywhere else. But now is the time for us to consolidate our effort and really trade amongst each other. And that's the beauty of what the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is representing. It is saying that let's review how we're structured as a continent, because we're coming from an era of colonialization where we were basically set up as just colonies of the world. And if you look at the setup of the trade routes and how everything was structured, we were just purely a supplier of resources to the rest of the world. But it's reviewing that and saying that for a continent that is this big, we need to look at how we can jointly, as brothers and sisters across the continent, how we can form industries that can start trading across each other. So from an innovator perspective, there's never been a better time to be part of the innovation as now, because you have all of a sudden, I'm gonna quickly present something that I try to create. I don't know if you can see it, Nikki, on your side.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just to place what we're saying in context, and just as far as the opportunity is concerned. So the actual free trade is really pushing for all of the countries, and it's been signed by about 54 countries in Africa, saying that let us allow for 90% of our goods and services to be traded freely across all the countries of Africa. The amazing thing is exactly what Sepati said right now, that this will be one of the greatest trading areas ever since the beginning of the World Trade Organization. And from what we see, there is a political will because there's been consistent, talk about AfCFTA, and just the spirit that it's coming with. You can see that all of the African leaders are really pushing for it. They said the average time it takes for any agreement to be effected in AU is about 5 years. But this one, they pride themselves that they completed this one in 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day.
Yeah.
And that shows you just how Africa is really pushing for something like this. It makes sense because all of a sudden you have access to about 1.27 billion people as a market. We've never had access to something like that. So as an innovator, you also have
Hamza?
A group of leaders across Africa that are saying, trade with us. We're opening a market for you to come and trade with us. Also understanding that we have, can you hear me, Sapati?
Yes.
Yeah, I had lost you there for a second.
Okay, sorry about that. So just the massiveness, if I'm an innovator and I'm sitting here and I was thinking of an innovation from just my perspective. So I like how Rendani preambled the discussion. He says, make it real, but make it real also understanding in future that there is an opportunity to scale because you have all of a sudden access with how Africa is now approaching the world and saying that we are one Africa. It almost all of a sudden garners investments from across the world because we're presenting ourselves as one market, meaning that there is an interest now from investors and the public-private participation to say, look, for this thing to work, we need to invest in infrastructure, we need to invest in telecoms, we need to make sure that the trade routes are working. So it is lucrative as a market versus just one country approaching the world. There's also going to be a big need for industrialization, exactly going back to the discussion that in the past, we were colonies, we were just using our natural resources and exporting them to the world. There was nothing that we were adding in value. However, this time then allows us to be innovative and to create industries that have never been there with a local flavor because we Africans are the best with resourcefulness. We know what our local problems are and we can develop solutions that can respond to Africa's needs. Those ideas, of course, are going to scale up and create industries, which in turn will create jobs for Africa, for the rest of Africa. So it's exciting times. I've never seen, in fact, before the discussion and the call, we had a meeting of all the speakers. This was the first time where you have about 60% of the participants. They are saying that we are investors, we are venture capitalists. And in the past, it was always a function of saying, if I'm an entrepreneur or I'm an innovator, I struggle because I don't have access to a market. AfCFTA is bringing the market to you.
Yeah.
AfCFTA is providing you, saying, we've been buying elsewhere. We want a replacement of some of these services and goods with a Made in Africa brand. Very exciting times. Also will be big issues around how do we protect the IP and considering that also there will be an opportunity for saying how do we share our IP across the different countries because I think to Nikki's point when she started, the COVID-19 created a big demand for a number of things and you'd find that different countries are doing similar things. But this time also allows us to build ecosystems and to start collaborating in innovation. So meaning that there'll be a lot of time to really focus on how we protect the IP, how do we collaborate, how do we harmonize the IP laws across the different countries. Of course, the policies within the countries and within the AfCFTA also have to be enabling to ensure that whatever we produce is bought within the markets that we have. There's been a number of changes to the policies. The countries are putting together industrial plans because they are preparing for providing for the supply into the AfCFTA. AfCFTA is targeted to generate about $6.7 trillion by 2030. It is possible. It's very much possible because currently, just across Africa, we're trading only about 18% of the GDP across Africa. And we could do much better with just changing a few things and opening the trade borders, the trade system. Free trade now enabling us to exchange goods and services with no cost, meaning that you start becoming competitive as an innovator or an entrepreneur in entering different markets. So it's the most amazing time. If I was in your shoes, what would I be looking at? I'd be looking at which are the goods and services that Africans are consuming today. What are the problems? What are the needs I need to be responding to, both from a local perspective, but also from a continent's perspective? Which are the countries, which are the economies I would look for? I'd look at for a bigger market size, whether it's in the short term or in the future term, and where are the growth areas? How can I develop them competitively? Because at some point, it will be a function of efficiencies that yes, we are producing a cell phone, but we need to look into the value chains of saying, how do I best produce what am I producing, or from an innovation perspective as well, because you are starting with an opportunity because you've seen a lot of like the Ubers being developed. You don't have a baggage of the systems of like the old systems, the future of saying, actually, if I need to scale in future, do I access other markets beyond my market with least costs? So when you're looking at the country,
Sorry, Pumza.
And the digital platforms.
Pumza? Okay,
I think she's having network issues.
Yeah.
The digital strategies that they are starting.
You should try to disconnect your camera. Maybe the bandwidth will be better.
Pumza?
Without the video.
Yes.
Sorry, man, we keep losing you, and you're sharing such valuable information for
yes.
innovators, and we don't want to lose anything. But your network is struggling.
You know?
Yes.
Yes.
No. We keep losing you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Good.
So maybe just
okay. Can you hear me?
Stop.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying maybe stop the video so that you allow the bandwidth.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Better. I think you can continue.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much better. Yeah. Otherwise, just then mute the video. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Sorry about that. So it's very exciting, exciting times. So my view was, if I'm an innovator, what would I be looking at? So I would look at markets, what is available, which markets I want to go with. An example of saying maybe a closed market, like in the previous time, Ethiopia would have been a market that was closed in the past, but is suddenly opening up, offering licenses into the market. And in the past, they've been reliant on devices which are numerous amongst, and has been closed to the rest of the world in as far as procuring devices. So is it a market that I would look at for innovation and maybe for low-cost devices? Yes, it probably provides enough of a market for me to be attracted to it. Where are the growth areas? How can I develop myself and in the innovation start already showing how competitive I can be? And you can do that with the digitization of your project, of your processes. You know, you at least coming into the innovation space with all the technology around. And to Nikki's point, how can you position yourself competitively using technology as well? The importance of sourcing of raw materials as well in future, when you are going to innovate this good or service, how will you source raw materials so that it is cheaper to your market? So with that being said, there's all the help that is available for innovators, and it's the best time actually to be coming up as an innovator. You've heard there's venture capitalists on the line. There's also a number of environments that are available, and I think I would like to speak high level about also what we do as the chamber in as far as innovation is concerned. High level, we're here to build ecosystems. We're here to support innovators, and this is why we're very interested in what is happening today. And we're also here to build, the bridges to your market. And we're here to also help if we can best position the innovators. That's it from my side, Sipati.
Thank you so much, Pumza. That really is quite a lot of information that even I myself as an innovator have learned a lot from and will definitely use, in terms of my strategies and going forward. So without wasting any time, I'm going to ask Ara, the CEO of Strategies, based in Abu Dhabi. I think it's his first interaction with Africa. Am I right? Am I wrong on this platform at this level? So I'm going to ask Ara to just, share with us what it means to be an impact entrepreneur in this day and age, taking into consideration COVID-19. I came across him for the first time, I think was about a month ago, because of the same executive education institution that we go to, and he was presenting on impact entrepreneurship, and a lot of what he was saying spoke to what I was trying to put together in terms of HD Africa and how we can help the innovators back here at home in terms of really implementing solutions that will solve for socio-economic challenges post-COVID-19. And we know that we have them all the time, but it's a matter of a fact that COVID-19 has really exacerbated some of the really struggling economies. So Ara, over to you to just lay the foundation and maybe share some insights with our innovators in terms of what the way forward is and what the rest of the world is doing to basically create a soft landing pad for those who want to solve for those kind of challenges.
Thank you so much, Sepati, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm actually excited to be in a platform in Africa. It's my first time to be here on a webinar in an African market. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to present what we're doing. I prepared the presentation for the session today, so I structure my approach today, and maybe it gives us a better understanding about what means social entrepreneurship. And many people today around the world, they have a confusion, and this is not something new, about what does that mean. So I'm a founder of Strategies and Innovate for Good. So what we do, we contribute to the growth of impact innovation and tech entrepreneurship ecosystem in Middle East and North Africa. In brief, my presentation is going to take 4 dimensions. First, I'm going to explain who we are, what means impact or purpose-driven entrepreneurship and investment, what purpose-driven businesses actually do, and what are the current trends, challenges, and opportunities. And I made some research on Africa as well, just to give a bit of more dimension to what we're saying. So who we are. So we are a sourcing, networking, and innovation platform, the operation that we have in Abu Dhabi. We're specialized in connecting communities, brands, capital, technologies, and ideas to drive and exchange value. So we collaborate with governments, international organizations, corporations, investors like angel investors and VCs and academia to promote and accelerate innovation, drive conversations, create market opportunities. And more importantly, we connect impact startups and SMEs as well with the ecosystem to help them thrive. So we are as well, you can consider us, we are an impact entrepreneurship business. So we pursue a larger social or environmental purpose, contributing in solving the most pressing and complex social and environmental challenges in the world through impact innovation and tech entrepreneurship. And one of the business lines that we have, I'm very proud of having it, is we help youth, and this is on the topic that our colleagues were just mentioning, to become more purpose-driven leaders and experts. And we are as well in future skills and trends. So there are today a lot of talk about what is impact-driven entrepreneurship on investment, or what is called today as well, what we know being social entrepreneurship. So for years, and this is something you would realize here, that the term social innovation has been, or entrepreneurship, been explained in various ways. And a lot of people, they can even get confused with it. They think a social entrepreneur is an NGO or they do charity. So actually, this is not true. So, so throughout the years, as you all know, there is the term CSR, or the corporate social responsibility. So, you know, many corporations in the world, they spend a lot of money on CSR, which these days has been debatable whether it works. There is what is called the social impact, and there is today what is called the impact bonds that governments are issuing as well. The term social entrepreneurship, sustainable business, the triple bottom line, profit, people, and planet, capitalism, and recently we learned what was launched in Davos was the stakeholder capitalism, benefit corporations, and today there is what we call B-certified companies, impact investing, or ESG standards. So these are, in brief, the term impact entrepreneurship. All of those, it can be explained, but what I will refer today in my terms, I'll be more focusing on what we call it impact entrepreneurship. Just to give it to you in more in brief, so at the heart all of these terms, okay, it's a new big idea that is basically that if you're a business or a for-profit business, you're going to need to make a profit. So when today you talk with VCs or with investors, when you tell them the term social entrepreneur or impact, they back off because they think you don't make money. But actually, this is not absolutely true, but there is some truth as well, because there are many startups as well in the world. They are more focused on the social aspect, but they forget a lot about the impact. So making a profit is how you stay in business, but it's not enough. So businesses these days can and should pursue a larger social and environmental purpose. So the big idea, that what I call it, is the bigger the profit, yeah, is bigger the impact. So let me explain what does that mean. So if today you want to make a big impact, you need to make a profit so that you can hire the best people in the market, you can invest in the best technology, and you can actually thrive and develop. Because if startups, impact startups, they are afraid or they don't know how to make money, they'll end up impacting maybe 10, 15 people, and their business over time, it will die. And VCs like Omar will never be interested in them saying that, where are you scaling? And this topic has been as well addressed. If you don't know how to scale, then better not to open a business, period. So everything is about scale eventually. So there is a term that Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka Foundation, said, and this is something I use it a lot. It said, social entrepreneurs are not content just to give a fish or teach how to fish. They will not rest until they have revolutionized the fishing industry. So this is another way to explain to you what means a social entrepreneur. So social entrepreneur is not a, so I will bring it more into dimension. So in a safe term, it refers to the creation of enterprises that are ethical, transparent, purpose-driven, and have meaningful impact on our lives. They focus on solving complex problems for the greater good. So this is something very, very important, that these days we need more complex problem solvers than anything else for the greater good. So unlike nonprofit and unlike philanthropists, impact entrepreneurs are focused on double or triple bottom line, that we call it the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit. They do not rely on donors. So this is maybe something that I need to make some emphasis here. The impact entrepreneurship aspect that we promote and support, we do not rely on donors, neither on charities. We focus more on driving value, creating market strategies, and more importantly, these businesses, they run like normal entrepreneurs. So it's not, so I just want to make clear here for everyone who's listening, this is where the focus of what we are promoting. So I can give you a little bit of examples of very famous impact entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs like You have a Grameen Bank, Muhammad Yunus, if you're familiar with, he's a Nobel laureate that created the entire industry of microfinance in Bangladesh. Today, the company provides loans to over 8 million borrowers, and today they are a multi-million-dollar business. You have as well a company called Cemex, it's a Mexican cement company, which they grew its profit by helping rural people in South America to build their own houses. And you have as well Seital. I don't know if you're familiar with this party, which is the founder is Mo Ibrahim, who could develop mobile communication in sub-Saharan Africa, where most people at that time had never used the phone or they never even owned one. So what he did, similar to Grameen and Cemex, he created what we call it a business model reinvention, or a market creating innovation, or what is called the disruption, or the term disruption, which is used. So what he did, he focused on serving the majority of transforming complicated and expensive telecom product in Africa into a simple and affordable so many people can use it. So what he did today, he created 8 million jobs, and he provided telecom access to over 1 million people. So as you can see that today, this is something I've been studying 2 weeks ago, which is something they call the BOP, which is the bottom of the pyramid for people, let's say, which they earn $2.5 a day. So sometimes you say, okay, the people are poor, how me as an investor or me as a startup, I can invest in places like this. But when you talk about globally, and that you have over 3 billion people, they are below $2.5 a day. So can you imagine if you can create a business for them? So can you imagine the impact that you do? So we're not talking about focusing on 100 companies or focusing on 2,000 companies. What I'm telling you, focus on 100 million people if you can. And if you can generate $1 from them a month, imagine how much money you can do. So the idea here is the BOP is one of the businesses that it's been currently been more and more practiced, is that focus on where the majority people are, and don't say they don't have money. Think about the mass, and if you put them all together, we're talking trillions of dollars. So here that we need problem solvers. We just don't want people to go there by simply thinking about making money. What you want, people that they have empathy, that they want to have a purpose, that say, I want to eradicate poverty, I want to eradicate hunger, I want to bring education. So can you imagine how much you can serve and how much you can, in the same time, make money? But for you to do that, you need investment, you need infrastructure, and so on. And then you enter in term, I just want to talk a little bit about this, which is called impact investment. So we talked about impact entrepreneurship. I explained to you in brief what does that mean. And I'll talk to you now about impact investments. So impact investments are investments made with the intention to generate positive, measurable, social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. So if you don't have a solid financial return plan, like any business, impact investors, they will never talk to you. So according to Financial Times, impact investing is one of the fastest growing areas of asset management, which continues to gather momentum now. According to the Global Impact Investment Network, the industry had $502 billion of assets under management. When we say asset under management, we talk about businesses actually and startups. More than twice the previous estimate, which was in 2017, which is 228 billion. And when you look at companies that are impact investors, or they have the line, you have like Goldman Sachs, Bain Capital, and BlackRock. So despite the mostly untapped potential, there is a barrier to unlocking large-scale global impact capital. And you know, like here today, you can as well talk about why not Africa is taking advantage out of all this impact, because I think there are a lot of opportunities there. I've read today on the Financial Times, it says that a 300 billion pension fund, for instance, seeking to write a check for 300 million into an impact fund in Africa will know that this is simply not viable, because underlying investment opportunity of that scale does not exist. So in another word, yes, you can. And yes, there are opportunities in Africa, but you need people with strong heart to invest and put the scale for you. So you don't need to look at it from a small, narrow-minded, because most of the time you look at things in narrow-minded. So, you know, I never believed that you should give people charity. I believe you need to empower people. And only by empowerment, you make transformation. Because if you keep on asking money as a donation, donation and philanthropy money has been over time has been declining. And this is where entrepreneurship and startup and innovation come into play. And so the more Africa invests, as you were saying earlier, on educating and empowering their youth, the more, and this is not only for Africa, by the way, this is like, you can say it in Middle East, in many parts of the world. So today, we cannot make Africa as a special case today. I think there are many countries around the world that they are exactly facing challenges like what your continent. So Africa is a continent I'm talking about, but you have as well countries which are great, like Kenya and other places, which they are putting a lot of money behind innovation and on the ecosystem. So the importance of impact investment in times of uncertainty, this is what you were saying on COVID. So this is a quote that I brought it for our meeting today. So as we embark on the new normal in the coming months, keep an eye out on the distant frontier where visionary entrepreneurs are facing the real problems of the future and creating real solutions. If there is a silver lining to the current world circumstances, it's impact investment. So what does that mean? It means that if today impact entrepreneurs, that they are made to solve problems and they are driven to solve problems, and you give them the opportunity and the drive to make it, you can transform Africa or any country or any continent into a manufacturing and into a know-how. And when it comes on the know-how development, or when it comes to capital building, you have everything that it needs. Today, everybody is connected on technology. So I don't see why you cannot have such innovation there in Africa, which I have met a lot of innovators throughout my career that come from Africa, which they are, for example, helping farmers with developing AI platforms to help farmers, for example, detect certain bacteria on their crops and to help them grow better farms. So yes, you have innovators, but I think there are not many. Why? Because the ecosystem is still new. And this is why I think, Sebati, what you're doing, it comes on time, because the market is going to see a tremendous growth. And according to many researchers, that last year was a very good year for Africa as a whole when it comes on funding for startups, where it was maybe a record year. But the sad news is that the COVID has made difficulty for most of them to thrive. So I think 80% of the startups that could find investors last year, I think they're not in good shape these days. I think like any parts of the world. So I'm going to here talk about a little bit about how, when you think about the impact entrepreneurship, what are the 4 aspects about driving it? So first, it requires to encourage purpose-driven business innovation. So today, this can go to municipalities, or it could go to the government. So the more you are purpose-driven, maybe you can have, or to the banks, or even to investors. I know some banks in Jordan and other places where they give preferential loans or preferential priorities for the ones who are trying to solve problems and they are purpose-driven. So the more, like when I say purpose-driven innovation, let's say somebody's trying to, eradicate poverty, and another one trying to spend money on gaming, for example. So which one would you invest? So this comes a discussion over there. So second, you need to mobilize finance that can be used to solve problems that affects the world's poorest or most vulnerable people. So, and I'm talking here all around the world, and COVID has made many people more vulnerable these days. Number 3, philanthropy and donor governments and charities alone no longer have the resources to solve the challenges addressed at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And today there is a funding gap, which was announced last year, which was close to $2.5 trillion. Can you imagine the number? It's a huge number. Therefore, governments cannot do it alone. So what you need the private sector to engage their talents, their resources and expertise to tackle the SDGs, the 17 SDGs that was presented. And number 4, you need to promote purpose-driven leadership among corporate leaders and youth. But this requires as well, the purpose-driven leadership, this starts from schools, it comes from the education and more programs to develop this kind of mindset among youth and build on purpose. Today, when you go to young people and you ask them what you want to do when you grow up, most of them, they don't know. But when you tell them what purpose you have and why you want to create a business, they will tell you, like, for example, I had some of the students I was once interviewing, some of them, they said, I want to work in medicine. I said, why? Because my friend died in a heart attack, very early age, and I want to create a device to prevent that. So the purpose is his priority. And another person was talking about plastic. Another person was talking about poverty. So as you can see, when your purpose is strong, no COVID and no challenge can stop you to achieve it. But when you follow only money, eventually, when the money is not there, you will run away very quickly. So this is why building purpose, understanding why you exist, understanding why you're doing your business, this is, I think, the priority of each one of us need to think. What am I doing? I mean, for example, if you ask me why I created Stratasys or Innovate for Good, why do I need to do it? My purpose is stronger because I have seen a lot of young people in our region, a lot of startups failing, and I wanted to make sure that I want to play a role in helping them grow, and I wanted to be part of solving hunger issues, solving health-related challenges. And today, I'm very glad that with the purpose that I have with my team, COVID happened, and we are very busy. Why? Because we keep working with our partners to develop programs to help startups, but we are changing directions on where more sectors and more opportunity exists. So how are businesses for profit actually pursuing social and environmental impact? So they go, so let me give you another aspect of it. So they're going after environmental challenges. So it's significant social impact. So any impact entrepreneur, they work on tackling environmental challenges, like on the topic that was you were addressing earlier, renewable energy, recycling, improving water conservation, electric cars, and so on. And meeting individual basic needs. Second, the focus on eradicating the negative effects of poverty, inequality, conflict, and crisis, and making sure that all humans have access to resources to meet their basic needs like clean water, healthy food, healthcare, protection from physical harm, energy, and increasingly digital access, empowering people with determination. And the number 3 is ensuring fair and equal property opportunity for all. So when you look at this slide in here, it gives you an explanation about when we say an impact entrepreneur, what type of business they are in. This is the type of business they are in. Some people, they claim like Tesla is one of, let's say, impact entrepreneurship business that they have, for example, is known for that. So the trends and challenges and opportunities. So now it's known everywhere, like since existence of human beings, I guess, that crisis always accelerates change. So this is the perfect time for innovation. Now, like last year, we had more saturation in all markets. So now there are new opportunities opening. A lot of businesses, sadly, are closing down. A lot of non-tech driven businesses are suffering. So what I've read on disruptafrica.com today, they're saying who will suffer more from COVID at the most basic level are companies who have to adapt to the new climate with remote working, the new way of the world. Beyond that, some sectors will be affected more than others by the COVID. As I said, the ones who are relying more on the B2B aspect or on big corporations. So who will gain and survive? Now, when you look at who will gain and survive and you look at what they are doing, except the e-commerce part, you see that all of the rest are impact entrepreneurship driven businesses. So people unable to shop, so they are going onto e-commerce. So if you're on e-commerce, then I think you have more chances to keep driving business. School closed, now EdTech is on the rise. So EdTech, education, access to education is one of the core sectors that exist in impact innovation. Certain areas of e-health, and also look at certain gain ground. Agriculture technology and innovation in agriculture can become one of the key innovation drivers in Africa. And I believe that you have a lot of opportunities. And I think you can actually, today, people are develop soilless media. I think you can grow vegetables and fruits without even soil and with very minimum water use. Why you cannot do it in Africa, for example? And I'm sure that many opportunities can come there because you have the population and you have the drive. But what you need, I think you need more people to believe in what you're doing. So small businesses, especially startups, are more agile than bigger companies in the current market. So our take is that the agile, so they can have more chances to survive than others. We did a polling last time with many startups and investors, and I would like to share with you 5 slides here just to give you a perspective about what people are thinking. So due to current disruption, are you planning to reinvent your startup business model? So as you can see that 89% of startups, they're planning to reinvent their business models. So this is a good indication that, as you can see, as I explained, a lot of big corporations, for them to reinvent it will take them longer time. As a startup, you can just do it in the evening and you can start fast doing it. And in my advice, the ones who are not actually doing it, you have to quickly do it. And I will give you some tips today about how you can actually go fast with them. So do you believe having tech-supported businesses are more likely to survive post-crisis? 96% of the people we interviewed, they said yes. The more tech-driven you are, the more you have chances to survive. So I feel very sorry for the non-tech driven companies, because I believe the more they are going to wait until COVID will end, until the economy will go down, I don't know if they will have enough cash to sustain it. So my advice, invest, innovate, put some money on R&D, understand what your customers they want, bring the customer cost down, improve their hassle, eliminate their hassles, and move fast. Every day goes by and you are not doing anything about that, you are delaying 1 week or even 1 month, and you are allowing your competitors to take advantage on that. So if your business is not purpose-driven, will it be difficult to survive the crisis? Maybe you might say that because we serve this sector, we had more people to say, 86% to say, yes, if you're not purpose-driven, it will be difficult for you to survive. I have more tendencies to say, if you are not in purpose-driven business, yes, you will suffer, because purpose-driven businesses, they focus on whether they're able to make the impact. So I will give you here an example about during my studies, I learned about, there was a guy who wanted to reduce malaria in one of the villages. And he said, if I can sell 10,000 nets, I can bring malaria down in that village 25%. Yeah. So actually he could sell 10,000 net, but he couldn't bring malaria down. So you cannot always look at how much you're selling, and you cannot look as well how much money you made. You need to look whether your purpose has been delivered, because today an impact investor is going to focus whether you delivered on impact. And the reason why he couldn't bring malaria down, because he didn't put a manual where he was distributing the net, so people, they didn't use it well. So as you can understand, yes, you can have a good spirit and a good soul that I want to make purpose, but sometimes you may do more harm than making good, because you need to understand how to become an impact entrepreneur, and you need to focus on the impact and make sure you make the money. So actually, it can be a bit more difficult than a basic entrepreneurs or conventional ones, but from spirit-wise and from soul, you will enjoy it more, because you will see how many people you are saving. So what are the next steps due to weather the current crisis or positive? So as you can see, we ask what people need to do or what you are doing. So 15%, they said that it requires a radical change of businesses to weather the COVID challenge. So you need to completely change what you're doing. Some are saying incremental change. Some are talking about reducing fixed costs, like staff, office rent, shortening their operation. And some are talking about hiring specialized staff on project basis only, like eliminating permanent and focusing more on freelancers and so on. And with industries, it is possibly that will grow. So this was a discussion we had with investors and VCs at that time. And they said that this is where they see more money will go there. 21% they said agtech and new food is going to be one of the key drivers of business. So startups that are here and innovators who are talking to us today and participating, these are interesting sectors for you to focus if you are not doing it already. So if you're in agtech and new food, any VC, any startup will jump on you, because this is where today the business is going. Robotics and AI, life science and health, edutech, gaming and marketing. It was before number 2, now today it's even on number 6 or 5. Recycling, waste management. In our region, for some reason, why water and fintech wasn't on the top, but I think COVID had made more focus on these 4 or 5 topics that you can see in here. So do you expect relocalization of supply chains due to COVID disruption will happen? So as you can see, the less you focus on B2B, the more you focus on B2C, which means that you're localizing your business. So, which means that many cities, many businesses need to focus on their local market. You don't need to focus to export, because I think what you need to do first to make sure that you have the local supply, because it's becoming export import more expensive and more challenging, has been disrupted. So as you can see, 90% people, they think that in the next couple of months, even 1 year or 2, there will be more growth in the local market development, which means local manufacturing, local trend, and even on the e-commerce, is local e-commerce as well is going to as well surge. So this is why the ones who are focusing a lot on export, I think focusing more on your country and on your maybe close region could be even more beneficial. So I'm going to give you 6 tips for all startups that are here today with us. 1, look for ways to reduce your costs, thus reducing client overall cost as well. So you need to go back to your customers with a cheaper cost, more value driven. And for you to do that, you need to reduce your cost radically as well. Be proactive, listen to your customers, and work on reducing their hassles. What does it mean? If today they're facing a problem to buy your product, understand why they're buying it. And sometimes you can even look at non-clients, why they are buying products from your competitors are not buying from you, and what others are doing better than you are. Be ready to invent your business model. I cannot emphasize and re-emphasize on this topic. Do not be stubborn or ego related that because I did that, I cannot change it. Yes, you can change it, because if you don't change it, you'll end up closing your business. Do not hesitate to ask for help and to collaborate. COVID, if it did one thing, it allowed more people to collaborate than ever. And number 4, leverage your strategic resources and competencies. For example, if you have a rooftop, make it instead of keeping it a rooftop, for example, in your apartment or in your building, transform it into a garden, or start to make crops, or transform it into, I don't know, something else. So any resource you have in your business, whether staff that you have, they are talented, maybe you can sell their services to even competitors. Today, there is something called co-opetition. There is more trends going on that competitors to collaborate as well, leveraging on both weaknesses and strength. Modify your revenue stream and diversify. Don't focus on one revenue at all. If you focus on one revenue, you'll end up going bankrupt very soon. Try to be diversified as much as possible. Look for non-clients and focus on opportunities to serve the majority, as I explained earlier. So I'm telling to every startup listening to me today, giving up is not an option. You will not give up because you have a purpose and you have a drive. Keep your morale high. Don't lose faith, and always remind yourself about your purpose and why it's worth persevering. Because today, every day, even myself, I wake up and I say, it's tough, I'm tired. But every time I remind myself that I need to strive, because only winners, the winners usually don't quit. So quitting is not an option. You don't need to quit. You need to remodel, take a step back, focus forward. But this is what I advise most of the people listening to us. And thank you so much. I'm available later on for Q&A, I guess, Sibati, if it's available.
Fantastic. I have actually just said that on the comments section, that if you have comments, questions, please just, make sure that you put them up there so that we are able to respond to as many as possible at the end of the session. And I just want to reiterate what I said in the comments section. This is your opportunity to learn as much as possible and to best prepare for your elevator pitch competition, because that is where you will be pitching your ideas, your concepts, your startups, scale-ups, whatever it is that you're doing or that you're busy with in terms of innovation in the continent. And with a platform such as this, taking us into the next speaker, which is Omar, who is a partner at Afrika Invest, a private equity fund and an investor. It really is important that you make sure you learn as much as possible and you best position yourself, because he is definitely one of the judges in the competition. So put up comments, questions, I don't know, anything, but take as much as possible from this. This is your platform, not necessarily ours. Omar, over to you. I don't know if I need to do another introduction, or are you comfortable?
No, it's okay. I can jump in, and thank you, Sepatri, for the fantastic job you were able to perform in such a limited time frame. In addition, in a difficult and unprecedented context. So we all agree that Africa needs to enforce new development models, which would allow to tackle the challenges that the continent and its population are facing. And before getting into the core topic, which is the introduction to the private equity and venture capital space, I would like to say a few words on the fact that this Corona crisis will further highlight our political, social, and economic strengths, while on the other hand, it will also reveal our weaknesses and even exacerbate those weaknesses in such a context where all economic and social factors are under terrible pressure. And I'm talking about health, access to health, transport, logistics, IT, infrastructure, education, etc. And we should therefore consider this crisis as a kind of a spotlight emphasizing what should be changed or improved in order to consider a more sustainable and more responsible development for our countries. And as mentioned by my fellow speakers, those opportunities will need to be tackled by ambitious entrepreneurs, but other players in the value chain are also required and have a strong role to play. And one of them is the investor, which role is to bring the financial means required to fund the realization of those projects. And the private equity investment space, or PE, as we usually call it, is a broad, is opaque, as investors are usually quite discreet on their inner functioning. But it is nevertheless fundamental for our economies, as it proved its effectiveness to foster innovation and disruptions in developed economies. Private equity firms are one of the most known players, but not always well understood on how they are functioning. And my role here is to bring more insight about it. And I have the honor to work within one of the pioneers of PE in Africa, which is African Invest. So we are a PE firm operating since 1994. With 1.5 billion assets under management, having invested in 150 companies in 25 countries in Africa. And among these 150 companies, we exited about 80 of them. Our operations are run from 9 offices. The headquarters are historically based in Tunisia. And we also opened regional offices with local teams in charge of deploying our funds in the country, at the country or at the regional level. We have an office in Casablanca, Algiers, Abidjan for Western Africa, French-speaking Western Africa, in Lagos, covering Nigeria and Ghana, another office in Kenya, in Nairobi, to cover East Africa, one in Paris and one in Cairo as well. And South Africa is one of our target countries as well. And we look forward to opening our next office there. And why opening so many offices? This is, let's say, maybe part of our DNA, to get close to operations and our portfolio companies, as we see the role of a PE firm not only as a provider of money, but rather as a partner who will assist and support the entrepreneur in its journey. So we aim to build trust between each others and work hand in hand to make the project and the business project successful. And this is the main difference between a PE investor and maybe a loan provider as a bank, which would be maybe more focused on the reimbursement rather than taking the risks. And the PE firm invests in capital and it becomes a shareholder. So PE is private equity. So we invest equity. So we become a shareholder of the company along with the historic shareholders for a limited time frame. The duration or the investment period ranges between 5 and 8 years, of course, depending on the maturity of the company. Sometimes it's not enough. We try to stay a little bit longer, but in average, the industry invests for between 5 and 8 years. And as I mentioned, we call it private equity because we provide equity, not debt, and private because we invest in non-listed companies usually, because we consider that listed companies have the means through the stock market to raise funds. And depending on the investment strategy, a PE firm aims to support companies at different stages of its life cycle. I think we've been discussing a lot about the early development in this webinar, talking about startup companies, but there is also there are also growth stages. There are also turnaround investments when we invest in companies in difficulties, needing money to face and overcome a conjunctural phase of its life. And we are expecting this specific segment to grow tremendously in this economic crisis context. And finally, we have also the buyout phase where a PE firm takes over a target company as part of a majority acquisition, allowing the historic shareholders to exit the capital. So private equity investment is therefore an alternative way to raise funds and maybe a complementary instrument to traditional funding means such as self-funding or bank loans. And PE investment doesn't limit to only the financial part or the financial component as a way to get access to money, but we believe that the real value of PE investment is the support that is attached to our investment. A PE firm aims to provide a very large set of assistance since the PE investor is engaged with the same interests as the sponsors of the company, taking the same risks in case of failure or loss, and of course also taking advantage from a success. And the support of a PE partner can be at different levels, such as strategic support, the improvement of the company's value chain, on production, distribution, logistics, the operational improvement as well, how we can assist the company to better manage its working capital, cost control, efficient productivity, etc. Our value addition can be also on HR and organization, including the improvement of the company's governance and decision-making process. This is a key part of our value addition. And also a PE firm can support the company when structuring financial transactions, maybe prepare for mergers or acquisitions, or even listing the company in a stock market. So in order to be able to provide such support, the PE partner would need to position in the governance bodies of the company, mainly in the board of directors, and sometimes also requesting the creation of additional bodies such as strategic committees. So those requirements are mostly established and agreed prior to the transaction. So when we are discussing and negotiating with a sponsor, with an entrepreneur, we agree in a legal document which is named the shareholders agreement, and we detail with legal wording the terms of the partnership between the PE investor and the other shareholders of the company. So coming back to what I mentioned in terms of governance, a PE firm would, for example, require a seat at the board of directors of the company, and that's some important and strategic decisions of the company cannot be taken without the positive consent or the positive vote or the consent of the PE firm. Meaning that, and sometimes it is quite complex to agree on that terms with our African entrepreneurs, especially when dealing with family business owners. So this is not something that is usual in our culture, and this is common to, I think, the whole continent and even in emerging markets, that family businesses have to, of course, understand and agree on the rules of the game, that a PE firm, once we invest money, we are shareholders and we have right as much as they are. And the shareholders agreements also sets the prospective conditions of a PE partner in terms of exit. For example, the shareholders can agree to list the companies in the stock market in 5 years term, for example, if market conditions are favorable, or they can also agree to sell the company to a strategic acquirer. So what am I introducing this exit terms, etc.? Because the entrepreneurs also have to understand and take into account when they provide an investment opportunity that a PE firm has its own constraints. They should also consider what are our objectives. We are of course here to invest and to deploy the money and of course support them in their strategy, but this is also to achieve our own goals. And the exit terms and exit performance is key in our role of a PE firm, because basically Afrika Invest and other PE firm, we are management companies with a mandate to manage funds where other investors are putting the money. So those investors are therefore expecting their money to be invested smartly, responsibly, and to create impact and generate returns, as Ara was mentioning earlier. So can they say, if we generate returns, they can keep on investing. So the money we are managing is not our money. We have a fiduciary duty to manage the funds and deploy them in line with the priorly approved investment strategy with our investors and specific investment criteria. We are not gambling, we are not taking risks we are not supposed to take or nor authorized to take. So this is something very important that entrepreneurs should keep in mind when addressing or when having discussions with a PE or a venture capital investor. We are not investing our own money, and we have also a very specific rules to follow. And this investment criteria I was referring to, maybe I can present what would be the ideal target company that can maybe cover or present this investment criteria. So the first thing we see when we are assessing an opportunity is the integrity and competence of the entrepreneur. I think that this is the most important thing. Rather than seeing first the company, we see who are the women and the men who are holding the project or who are running the company. So this is the first and most important criteria we assess when having an investment opportunity. Then we see, of course, the reputation and expertise of the company, if it has a good positioning, if it has a competitive edge, it can be a technological edge, a specific innovation, it can be a strong brand, well-established brand in a country or in a region, the organization, human resources, etc. And of course, all of this is assessed during the due diligence that we perform on the company, its development, and also the transparency of the management and the rigorous processes put in place are key. The management team also is an important aspect we look at, the track record, and the fact also when sometimes you have shareholders of the company who are not really running the company. You can have an independent management team. So maybe what PE firms like is when the management team is or have interests in the capital. That's why a lot of PE firms enforce a stock option plan to incentivize the staff. This is also very important for us to create an alignment of interests within the investee company. The sector is very important, the growing sector. the visibility on the sector, I can only emphasize what Ara just mentioned regarding the ability of the company to be resilient in its sector, and its ability to mitigate the risks and any crisis such as the one we are experiencing right now. The impact also, I'm just mentioning again and confirming what Ara presented previously, and I fully agree with his approach, and confirmed when it comes to the correlation between impact and profits. Of course, sustainable profit will allow to create and to generate a long-term impact on employment, allowing a leapfrogging, for example, innovation. And I'm personally within Africa Invest focusing right now on a specific initiative dedicated to the financial sector. Our objective is to increase financial inclusion within the continent, because we also believe that this is one of the key enabler of our African development. Profitability is something we look at, not only future profitability, but if we have some metrics of if we can modelize what would be the profitability of the company, we do it. And if we can do it, I think it would be a very risky investment, and a lot of PE firms will not get their IC or their investment committee approval. So even though the startup company is not profitable, they should have a strong visibility on and with the good commercial performance and on how they will generate profits. And the possibility to scale is also something that many venture capital investors are looking at when assessing an opportunity. And this is where entrepreneurs should take advantage from the African Free Trade Agreement. Of course, this is a unique opportunity that needs to be taken into account and leveraged on. Valuation is also, we did not talk about it earlier, but a reasonable valuation is at investment is key. The valuation exercise, at least at the level of Africa Invest, and I think at the level of many private equity firms, the valuation is one of the most common deal breakers. So we are trying to be creative and propose, of course, win-win transaction structures with entrepreneurs. A PE firm would not be very keen on paying a very high valuation based on future performance if we don't have a very good indicators that this future performance would be achieved, because we are taking the full risk, which is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Of course, good exit perspectives is also something that every entrepreneur should keep in mind, meaning providing good exit perspective to his PE partner. And there are some sectors, of course, that are appealing as they address a market need or with a huge gap across many countries, with the possibility to scale and reach a sizable position. And some of these appealing sectors, I coming back again to what Ara was mentioning and confirming that VC firms, even in Africa, are now looking at startup space, mainly focusing on health and health tech. In more general words, maybe access. I think the word access is key today. It can be access to energy, access to other services, telecom, water, etc. I think we're also looking strongly at GovTech and RegTech, meaning government and regulation, technology startup, to support and foster the digitalization trends in our countries. FinTech and InsurTech are still sought with strong interests, even though it's not in the maybe in the charts that Ara showed us earlier. But I can assure you that within Africa Invest and other and other competitors, we are looking at fintechs, and there are strong competition on fintechs.
Yeah.
Actually, this crisis also showed us that the traditional lending or payment process should be digitized, and of course there are some startups that are taking position right now, mainly leveraging on mobile, because basically if you take Africa, you have 20% banking penetration rate, and on the other side you have maybe 80% average mobile penetration rate. So if you can use mobile phone as a mean to pay, I think there is this possibility to make the banking penetration rate jump from 20% to maybe 50 or 60% quite easily. And this is something that many startup companies are positioned on and trying to get advantage from it. Education, e-commerce, transport and logistics, agri-tech. So I fully agree with what Ara was mentioning. So all that to say that there are plenty of opportunities that our young African entrepreneurs can tackle. And the other hand, private funds have never been so accessible as today. The number of financial investors and the funds available have been steadily growing for the last 10 years, which makes me very optimistic for the next decade. And I'm sure that on the long term, we will turn this crisis into an opportunity for our continent to rise up. And maybe still on the same topic, PE firms and VC firms have raised substantial amount of money, more than ever. And I can tell you that we are on the starting blocks as investors. We know that huge or very good performance and returns can be generated in crisis periods, meaning that every crisis brings a lot of opportunities. And if you get closer to, if you get a closer look to PE funds performance, and I'm talking about the private equity funds who started investing during the previous financial crisis. It was 10 to 12 years ago. They recorded the best performance ever. So that only means that this is a crisis, this is conjunctural, this is the time where we should position as investors. So we are just waiting for good opportunities, and we are very optimistic that it will generate strong returns. And also maybe final few words to entrepreneurs who are listening to us and who are preparing their deck to pitch PE or VC investors. Just please make sure that your presentation and the message you are conveying is clear and precise, and takes into account what have been shared in this webinar. I think that you have all the materials to make it very appealing. Of course, if you have a consistent project, I think any private equity or VC investor will be at least listening to you and assessing your opportunity in details. Voilà.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Omar. And just maybe a question from me. Ara mentioned that there's a 2.5 trillion funding gap globally. I just want to know from you, how much of that are you covering for the HD Innovation Hub?
What do you mean by covering?
No, I'm kidding. That have
we will try to cover 100%. No,
yes.
basically, you know, there is this leverage effect that a private equity firm can have, because when you see where is the gap or the need in terms of investment, this is of course a global need. But for example, if we invest $10 million in a microfinance company, this microfinance company would be able to distribute this 10 million, twofold or threefold or fivefold, So there is this leverage that we should play on, and it's not only in the financial sector; it can be only in other sectors, and it can go really quickly. as we saw for the telecom, for the IT and the telecom sector, Ara was mentioning the success stories, and in East Africa, we all know the M-Pesa huge and successful initiative in making mobile money accessible and widely used. And I think this is a very good performance that that other countries now are inspired to replicate.
Awesome. I totally agree with that. And I'm very excited and looking forward to all the collaborations that will obviously enable us to put together these ecosystems and ultimately, you know, realize our vision of building the Africa that we want. And in closing, I just want to also give the opportunity to Emmanuel Gamon from Gamon Enterprise. He's an ecosystem builder, speaking of ecosystems, a speaker and a very passionate host on key issues pertaining to the development of our beloved continent. I've had many conversations with Gamon on how our youth in this day and age are privileged to be able to play significant roles in terms of changing the face of the continent economically, politically, and otherwise. So I'm very excited to hear what he has to share with our young entrepreneurs and innovators. And without wasting any more time, Emmanuel, are you on?
Hi Sapati. Hi everyone. Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can.
Yeah,
We hear you well.
Excellent, cool. It's a pleasure to be on here. I'm super excited about HG Africa, but I'm also coming on the back of quite a lot of rich resources that our Rosemary, a couple of people have also shared, right? As I told Sapati, I wanted this to be as interactive and question-based as possible. Just for context on my professional background, I'm doing research with Wits Business School on innovation management, and my focus is on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So it's actually excellent to see that there was a couple of slides that was shared earlier on about the opportunity that intertrade allows. My focus is a bit more on trade and services, and because of now COVID, understanding what digital, what professional competence, what learning and knowledge transfer looks like when we consider the entire Pan-African trading bloc, and lessons learned from SADC region, lessons learned from ECOWAS and the East African regions as well. So those of you who are gig economy workers, who spend as much time as I do online with digital, that's an exciting space. Yeah. I'm also very big on ways in which we can contribute to the platform economy. I think most of the time, a lot of the programs for digitizing our youth and our young people is participation. So it's like, you need to get on WhatsApp, you need to get on Google products, we need to get on Facebook products, etc. We also need to create space for creating our own indigenous platforms that speak to our ways of working. Then that way we can also try to scale up on profits on that. So that's keen focus one. Two, originally from Ghana, happy and excited to be here in South Africa, Joburg at this moment, but I was teaching entrepreneurial leadership at Africa Leadership University in Mauritius before I moved here, and well, parts 2018, but now focused a lot. And one of the things that I'd love to tell a lot of the folks who are in this competition as well is that more than anything, your entrepreneurial innovations, the businesses, enterprises you come up with, they should fit into a need here and today. And because of this pandemic, they should also fit into a community need as well. I think that there are lots of opportunities for us to look at within our communities that you find yourself in and fill in a lot of gaps. As Ara shared as well, from supply chain logistics to whether it's the Internet of Things or connectivity, we need as many innovative but community-based in order to meet the last mile or unbanked economy, or folks that some people might say the informal economy range, that a lot of corporates, honestly, they don't have the competence, they don't have the indigenous knowledge, and they're not able to play in as much as each and every single one of you who's listening in on this platform. So that was one of the things I wanted to highlight. And Sapati rightfully mentioned, I started a podcast because the last 5 years, I'm a member of the World Economic Forum. I'm currently on the Impact and Knowledge Council as a co-chair. And part of what I volunteer my time doing is kind of one, advocating that on the African continent, we also have value based on our experiences, based on our previous work, based on quite a lot of interesting initiatives that I've seen in co-working spaces, accelerator hubs, whether it's from Chimalahong Precinct to Inno Hub to CC Hub, all over the place, a lot of them. And I used to be with Impact Hub in Accra as well. I think it's important that we present some of those, but we also learn globally, and that knowledge share is not just in academia, or it's not just when folks have the privilege to join these large corporates, right? So that's one of the interesting things that I get to do. And because of that experience, I started a podcast called Unpacking Africa. And the whole modus operandi of that is to have conversations with entrepreneurs. Let us share what our challenges are, maybe create a map, if you will, so that those who are in the current stage, we also have a shorter way of getting to the destination for economic growth, economic empowerment, and delivering on a lot of whether it's Agenda 2063 promises or it's the SDGs for a more equitable society. We're intentional about it. I've seen a couple of questions. I would love for my presentation to be more, I am a peer, I am just like you. I've started businesses on my own. I've worked for local companies. I had Global Media Alliance in Ghana. I've worked with University of Stellenbosch Executive Education, Standard Bank Accelerator here. I've worked for international companies, Google and YouTube as YouTube manager in Ghana. So I would love for those of you who are listening to drop questions in there. I can see the chat, and then have my submission be a little bit around some of the things that you guys were saying. I think that as you're going into this space though, one thing that I learned fairly recently, like 2-3 years ago, that I wish somebody had told me before I started my entrepreneurial journey. I finished undergrad, or my first degree, or what you guys equivalent of honors here 10 years ago, 2009. When I had done that, I'd wish somebody had shared with me this. And this is really like, kind of have a definition of what your startup is going to be. I think it's very important. Everybody starts up, you have a business, you have an entrepreneur, but there are categories that help you understand the constitution of it, the products that you serve, but also invariably how you're able to scale it. So if you're listening right now, you're participating in the innovation competition and others. And I'll give you a few examples. It's not exhaustive by any means, but it kind of gets you into that framework, right? So when you're starting up, are you creating a product or service that is going to be complementary? If it is complementary, for example, you're looking at accessories to your iPhone, maybe it's your charger, it's the headphones, right? These are complementary to the phone itself. So the product that you create, this cover, is very dependent on the original phones that are created. And there's a huge industry that Apple or Android phones have allowed, Samsung. And these are complementary businesses. So if you're creating a business, if that's the purpose, then you need to know what industries you're complementary to. You need to understand their value chain, their supply chain, and then how you fit into the model. I had a call recently with a group that deals with family-owned businesses, and the stats out there is that 80% of GNP is really owned by family businesses. It's a family business, not just in Africa, but in Germany and Switzerland and the United States. So if you think of your big industries, whether it's in agriculture, mining, and others, family businesses are the ones that tend to have longevity. But on the continent, we don't seem to have established family businesses beyond 2-3 generations. Why is that? So if your business is something that, one, you're getting transfer of knowledge from your parents or from something that your family is good at, then you as a starting up have that at the back of your mind. And then the alternative is also true. If you're doing a business idea now, something you're passionate that you'd like to pass on to your kids, also articulate that. That's also important. And if your startup, again, it's a lifestyle startup. So some of us have things that we would do, and sometimes lifestyle startups fit into a bit of what I heard around social entrepreneurship. There's an intrinsic value or worth, something that is aligned with your life personally. For me, it has to do with education. So I have a social enterprise called Readiness, and anytime I learn something new, I do workshops in different schools, usually a tier lower, so secondary schools or elementary schools, to share. right? And it's something that the participants may not be able to pay for it. So I need to have a business model for either funding and others, but I know that it serves the lifestyle that I want to have. And so for all of you guys, these are just 3. I'll stop here. Hopefully, if there are any questions being dropped in the chat. But think through, just don't think through your idea of starting up. Think through what kind of startup do you want. Maybe the last one would be helpful because it ties right into the previous speaker and talking about valuation. You can also, and probably this is more popular when you go through an accelerator program, you create a startup that's set up for acquisition. And if you set up a startup for acquisition, it means that how you register it, who's on your board, what registration looks like, partnership looks like. These things matter because, again, that's when valuation comes in. That's when people want to look at your books. So from inception, you've created a structure because you understand that what you're starting up is going to be acquired by another company. So the way that you decide on investing your resources has to align with the end product of that as well. So hopefully this brief snippet of what I'm sharing is impactful to you at this moment. Happy to take questions if you have any further, so I can dive into it.
I like that. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. But as you said, I think let's jump straight into the questions. And before I do that, I really think that, you know, tying back to the importance of impact entrepreneurship, taking into consideration what's happening globally in terms of the pandemic, I really think what you just said, you know, in the last comment about starting up or creating a startup that is fully set for acquisition opportunities, that's very important. I think a lot of us don't think that far because there's a level of responsibility and engagement that actually comes with that. So when you set up your startup for acquisition, in terms of governance, whether you're a family business or whatever, in terms of governance, in terms of your partners who's on the board, as you said, you think long term versus how we start, you know, startups and think, you know, end to or means to an end in terms of some of the entrepreneurs that do business in the African context. So without wasting any further time, or I think we have questions. I see two or more questions for Omar. The first one is, am I correct? Okay, let me just, okay, no, I need to scroll back up. So there's Gerald who's asking, whatever ideas that are realized in the session, what is next? How do we turn these ideas into profits? Sure, who's going to answer that? Look, I think, okay, Ada, you can take it. Thank you.
Hi, Sefati. You know, we work a lot with startups, and the first thing I can tell you, the biggest challenge today is to bring your first customer. Without looking into profit, you need to first, I mean, you know, I am more leaning towards encouraging startups not to depend on investors rather than trying to have proper businesses and start to sell to customers. So creating value, it should be one of the core elements of your business. So just like a startup is like just like any business. At the end of the day, you have a customer that needs to buy from you. If you cannot create value to that startup to buy from you, then there's a challenge. So forget about investment. Maybe Omar here will tell you as well, selling equity is very, very, very expensive. Don't look at you're getting money from them. Actually, when your business works well, and actually they are not going to invest in the business, it doesn't work. So when it works, I'm sure they are not, PEs are not like VCs. VCs they take more risk, but PEs, they don't even take risk. So the idea here, in my advice, make sure you are able to sell your product. And this should be your obsession. Your obsession should be, how can I make my first customer? And number two, how I can retain that customer and make more customers. So the more you can transform your business into a more sustainable business, you don't even need investors. You can do it on your own. The idea here, you need to maybe look for friends to give. If your idea is so good, maybe your family, friends, and can help you. So usually VCs and PE, anyone who didn't start to make business yet, they need to start think about, they need to put money from their pocket first. They need to look at their friends or their family to help them. You may need to look for angel investors that they are ready to support you. And when you reach into a certain development stage, you have your MVP, you have a prototype, and you're able to sell, and there is a customers, then you reach to the point that you speak with VCs and PE. Once, my priority here, have customers and make sure that you're solving problems and people are ready to buy from you. Mm-hmm. This is what should be the obsession of every startup, and not to look for VCs or investor at any point. Profit comes later, but first you need to build the business. Then think about profit.
Awesome.
Just would like maybe to add a complimentary comment on what just Ara just mentioned, and of course once again I fully agree. But one important thing to keep in mind is that any investor and VC investor, venture capital investor, and maybe just we can just be a little bit more precise to for our audience. A private equity firm invests at a later stage, while VC venture capital firms are investing in earlier stage of the startup company. So of course the VC investors are taking more risks, and on the other hand are expecting higher returns. So this is quite obvious. And regarding this equation regarding profits and how shall we go to the market and penetrate the market, gain customers, and then how we should generate profits. This is of course very complex exercise, but just keep in mind that a VC firm, maybe the first thing that a VC firm would do, which is not common to other PE firms, is how much does it cost you to acquire one customer, and then how much would this customer generate what we call the lifetime value. And this is an important exercise, because if it costs you more than you will generate, even a VC firm would be reluctant to invest. And you need to show you need to be able to show with the concrete metrics that when you will be able to further penetrate the market, you will generate returns. This is quite a complex exercise, but you need to have all the support data to convince the VC firm, the VC investor, that profits are down the road.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is from Yiko Mungwe. It says, in terms of valuation, how does the valuation come about? Through the entrepreneurs propose a value? I think he's speaking directly to your comment about fintechs.
About fintechs, but yeah, this is common and general to all startup or all companies. Entrepreneurs should have their own idea on valuation, because of course a VC firm would expect from an entrepreneur to propose a valuation. And of course, we will do our own homework. Regarding the methodology we use for valuation exercise, I think that they are diversified and various, and depends also on the stage, the development stage of the company. For more mature businesses, we can use multiples of EBITDA, or multiples of what we call the price earning ratio, which is a multiple of net earnings of the company. So valuation here for mature companies is based on its profitability, its current and future profitability. We can also use what we call the DCF models, the discounted cash flow models, when we are trying through a business plan to take into account future benefits or future cash flows that the company will be able to generate, because these cash flows will allow the company to pay dividends to its shareholders, and we will increase its valuation in the future. For startup companies in early stages, it is a little bit more complex, because sometimes a startup company which invested a lot and is still incurring a fair amount of money every month with the what we call the cash burn, meaning that the company is still burning cash to build its model and to build its customer base, we can only assess and rely on the revenues, for example, the revenues base, or the revenues curve. Is the company able to increase its market share? Is it able to enroll more customers? And we can therefore find a multiple based on revenues. We can, for example, propose you as a valuation of your company 3 times revenues of last year or the last 12 months, or 3 times revenues of the last month multiplied by 12, meaning that we take into account only the performance of the last month. Or also we can also integrate the growth rate of your company. So it's not an easy exercise. That's why many venture capital investors will also take further security instruments or rights. For example, the what we call the liquidity preference right, meaning that if we invest $10 million, for example, whatever would be the performance of the company or the valuation at exit, the VC firm would at least, or will at least recover its investments, its initial investment, it's $10 million. And sometimes we can even go further in the transaction structure. For example, we can invest with caps and floors, and sometimes saying that we invest in convertible shares, meaning that we should not agree on a specific valuation right now, but when the company will get more mature and will be able to raise additional funds in a further round, the early investor will get, for example, a 20% or 30% discount on the valuation that will be retained for the next round. So there isn't a specific methodology. That depends on the case. It's a custom-made exercise depending on the company and the opportunity. And of course, it also depends on the competition, because between VC investors there is a competition, and some of them are willing to take more risks than others. Voila.
Okay, so I see that there are a lot of requests for this to be made available, the recording. We'll definitely do that. I think we have everybody who registered email addresses and contact details, so we will share. And we will definitely obviously share with the innovators and the startups who registered for the competition to be able to better prepare for what's coming. Let's see. There is a notion of management consulting being needed by relatively large companies. However, there seems to be a need for SMEs to also benefit from management consulting services. What does one need to have in mind prior to making an elevator pitch? Are there any opportunities for funding initiatives driven for improving businesses at SME levels by way of consulting? That is a question from Colin Norman. I don't know if anybody wants to take it. Okay, so I think it's a lengthy question. I agree. We can always look at it because also in terms of the in the interest of time, we can look at it at a later stage and maybe respond to the person individually. I don't think they're still on anyway. Are there any other questions besides what's on the comments? If you have a question, you can raise your hand and maybe ask it directly to the speakers. I'm just going to open up for that for the next 2 minutes. Anybody, questions, comments?
Maybe, yeah, go ahead, Emmanuel.
Cool, thanks, Omar. I was just gonna say, I think for most people, there was a more elevator pitch specific comment. A lot of what we've shared is cumulative knowledge. Like a lot of what Ara has said is helpful throughout your entire entrepreneur journey. Omar is sharing specifically for venture capital and others. For each of you that are candidates on here, most of the time for any pitch, we want clarity of thought. We want you to want to know that you actually have a plan. You're not just winging it. You're not wasting folks' time. You actually meet a need of some sort. This is not just a fairy tale. It's not a fantasy because entrepreneurship sounds sexy or sounds like a name title that looks good for you. But thirdly, also, the most important thing is the sustainability model. Like, who are the stakeholders? Who are you giving it to? How are you looking to make money? And is there some type of articulation that this thing is going to be able to generate income? A lot of the things that we're sharing, obviously, you can find either templates for valuation, you can find resources for on whether it's your kind of like your supply chain model, your demand side, who these things are. But when you are pitching, you're actually selling something that you say you're going to be committed to. That is on you. That's not something you Google and Google would bestow upon you. If you're saying you're going to be innovative, that drive needs to come from you. So hopefully for those pitching, you've asked yourself those questions in front of a mirror. So when you come in front of the panel, that's not the question we're going to be asking you. It's clearly important. There are many parts of an ecosystem that you can play in. You can be a teacher, you can be a doctor, you can be something else. You don't have to be an entrepreneur or an innovator. But if you do want to be an innovator, make sure you've asked yourselves those critical questions so that it's conveyed strongly, and then the panel can dive into your why and hows, and that way it becomes a much richer pitch or elevator pitch presentation.
I would like to add on Emmanuel, so we are running an innovation challenge now. We will be, after a couple of days, we're finishing it. But I will share with you a slide. I shared it with our startups earlier. This is more like, because our pitch is fully online, I will share with you the tips that we gave them. Maybe this is something you can use. This is something we want most startups to have in mind when they are. Feel free to take a screenshot. So the elevator pitch usually is 2 minutes. The first thing is your idea should be very compelling and clear. The simpler it is for people to understand, the better it is. So you need to have a clear value proposition, and then the challenge should be very clear. So today you need to put a problem and you need to present the solution. And as Omar was saying, the team comes in priority. So the way most investors, they look at the pitch, they look at the value proposition, they look at the challenge that you're trying to solve, the solution, and how it will be solved, and the team. Number two, one of the key areas is the real problem or customer needs clearly stated. So you need to make sure that you are solving something. I mean, let's say you are eliminating an element in a certain value architecture. So this is why by